The plane door sealed with a heavy pneumatic hiss, trapping the stale, hurried air of the terminal with the man in seat 4A. His name was Phoenix, though no one knew it, and he was carrying the kind of quiet, crushing failure that made a man want to vanish. Jack Turner felt the weight of the moment more heavily than the duffel bag he'd just wrestled into the overhead bin. It was 5:15 a.m., and the darkness outside pressed against the small window, reflecting back a face marked by 3 years of impossible struggle. This cross-country flight was not a journey, it was a desperate, one-way transfer. Every cent spent was a ghost of the welding shop he'd lost, the specialized career he'd sacrificed, and the life he couldn't hold onto after his partner passed. Beside him, 5-year-old Leo slept, oblivious to the financial hemorrhage of their existence. The boy was an anchor of pure, innocent warmth, his body curled into his father's side, clutching his dinosaur-print blanket. Jack looked at Leo, then at the empty space beside them. The silence where Leo's mother used to sit was louder than the engines. In the pressurized cabin, Jack was a glitch. His worn clothes, his rough, calloused hands, the faint oil stain on his old jeans, they marked him as labor, as background. The woman in 14B, a blonde executive, stiffened and immediately adjusted her noise-canceling headphones. The businessman in 13A let out an audible, theatrical sigh when Jack's old bag scraped his briefcase. The judgment was silent, but it was there, a systemic chill hanging in the air. Jack was invisible, and he knew it. He preferred it. But here is the secret the other passengers didn't know, the ghost in the machine they couldn't see. For 8 years, Jack wasn't just a mechanic, he was a hydraulic specialist with the 58th Fighter Wing. He didn't fly the F-15 Eagles, but he was the final signature that guaranteed their wings wouldn't fail and their landing gear wouldn't lock up. The drone of the turbofan engines was a language he knew by heart, a complex, high-stakes symphony of thrust and pressure. About 45 minutes into the flight, long after the boredom had set in for the rest of the cabin, Jack heard it. A sound that shouldn't exist. It was a faint, almost imperceptible womp-womp-womp overlaid on the steady hum. A high-frequency vibration, a signature he hadn't heard since a critical failure test 7 years ago. It felt like an alarm bell ringing only in his skull. He pressed his temple against the cold window. Was he stressed? Was this desperation turning into professional paranoia? He looked at the oblivious flight attendant, cheerfully handing out bags of peanuts. No one else heard it. But the sound persisted, emanating from the left wing. Jack knew, with the cold certainty of years spent troubleshooting multi-million-dollar machinery, that a subtle imbalance in the auxiliary hydraulic system was escalating. If he was right, a major pressure drop was imminent, waiting for the wrong moment, the landing. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. He couldn't just say something. He was the invisible man. He'd be dismissed, maybe even viewed as a security threat. He reached into his backpack and pulled out his worn, silver multi-tool, holding the cool, familiar metal like a talisman. It was the only tangible link to the expert he used to be, the Phoenix he once was. The tension was suffocating, trapped entirely within Jack's 14A space. He focused, mentally isolating the source, left wing. Definitely the left wing. Leo slept on, protected by his father's coiled watchfulness. Suddenly, the captain's voice crackled to life, tight and professional, but laced with an urgency only another professional could spot. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've received an advisory regarding some unexpected, air traffic ahead. We're being vectored slightly south of our original flight path. Standard procedure. Nothing to worry about. We may have some company shortly. Unexpected air traffic. On a commercial corridor. This was code. Jack's heart hammered. His certainty that the subtle vibration was getting worse solidified. Then, about 15 seconds after the captain's announcement, the plane banked sharply, too sharply for a standard vector change. Jack pulled Leo closer as the boy whined softly. He scanned the window. The sky was empty, but then, a flash. A gray blur, moving too fast, too low, too metallic to be civilian traffic. It zipped past and vanished. The major walked down the aisle 5 minutes later. This was the moment the narrative broke open. She was immaculate, silver oak leaves gleaming, a major, moving with a calculated, dangerous grace. She paused at the front, exchanged urgent, low-toned words with the crew, and then began moving toward the back of the cabin. She passed 10A, 11A, 12A. Her eyes were focused, searching for one specific person. She stopped right beside Jack's seat, 14A. Jack's breath stalled. Had they somehow spotted the multi-tool? Excuse me, sir, she said, her voice steady and trained. She scanned his face with an unnerving intensity. Are you the passenger who claimed prior service with the 58th Fighter Wing? Jack felt the blood drain. Claimed? It sounded like an accusation. Yes, Major, he managed, his throat tight. I did. Hydraulic specialist. 8 years. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a near hiss, cutting through the cabin noise. And what, she asked, with zero preamble, was your call sign? The silence was immense. Leo stirred. Jack hadn't heard that name in almost a decade. It felt like summoning a ghost. It was Phoenix, he whispered. The sternness instantly vanished, replaced by an expression of complex relief. She straightened and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod of respect. Phoenix, she repeated, the name sounding perfect. You need to look out your window, sir. And you need to look now. Jack wrenched his head toward the window, pulling Leo with him. He expected a tribute. He was met with a tactical intervention. 2 glorious, terrifying, perfectly maintained F-15 Eagles flanked the commercial jet. Their presence felt impossible, defying the basic rules of civilian air travel. The sun glinted off their skin, and they flew in such disciplined formation they seemed locked in the air. And they were signaling. The lead jet, positioned slightly ahead and below, tilted its wings in a deep, calculated bow. The co-pilot in the second jet raised a gloved hand in a crisp, sharp salute. Leo gasped, wide awake. Daddy! Look! They're giant toys. But then, the lead F-15 pulled a high-G maneuver, rolling sharply into a bank, dropping forward, and performing what Jack recognized instantly as an undercarriage inspection pass. They were flying directly beneath the plane, close enough that the air pressure pushed against the glass. This wasn't a tribute. This was tactical reconnaissance. Jack turned to the Major, his eyes wide with dreadful understanding. Major, they're looking at the undercarriage. Is it the hydraulic system? Her face went pale, her composure fracturing. How did you? There's a persistent harmonic imbalance in the left wing's auxiliary pump, Jack said, the professional emerging fully. It's been getting worse. They're confirming external leakage or, God forbid, a landing gear door misalignment. The Major gripped the back of his seat, her voice a desperate, near-silent demand. It's a microfracture in the main strut housing. We detected the signature, but we need visual confirmation before the final approach into Seattle. We need to know if we need to deploy the foam trucks. The salute was a pretext for a high-speed, high-stakes reconnaissance mission, orchestrated by pilots who trusted one civilian mechanic's ability to diagnose a subtle error signature. Jack's mind was instantly back in the hangar. Tell them to look for the discoloration line just aft of the primary reservoir. That's where the pressure failure will show first. They'll see the mist. The Major immediately pulled a satellite phone, scrambling to relay the message. The 2 F-15s climbed back up, resuming their flanking position. The lead pilot dipped his wing once, a clear, sharp acknowledgement. Then, they throttled up and, with a shudder that vibrated through the plane, they were gone. The entire cabin erupted. It was a loud, spontaneous, joyful roar of applause. The businessman in 13A looked like he'd seen a ghost. The noise-canceling woman in 14B finally ripped off her headphones, staring at Jack. Jack was shaking. He turned to the window, watching the empty blue sky, the silence suddenly deafening. The plane began its slow, steady descent. The Major was focused on communication. Jack, hollowed out by the adrenaline crash, was wiping sweat from his brow. Who was that, Daddy? Leo asked, still buzzing, his small hand stroking Jack's cheek. Friends, buddy, Jack managed, his voice raw. They were very good friends. Then, an elderly gentleman in a simple gray cardigan, who had been sitting quietly in the aisle seat, 14C, stood up. He hadn't said a word the entire flight. He was frail but his eyes were sharp, calculating. He leaned across the aisle and spoke directly to Jack. Phoenix, he said, his voice surprisingly robust. It's remarkable how well your network operates, even a decade later. Jack stared at him. Sir? Do I know you? The Mun gave a slight, knowing smile. I was the Chief of Staff for Air Force Logistics Command when you single-handedly saved the Desert Fire Initiative prototype by fabricating a custom seal in a field hangar with nothing but a blowtorch and a prayer. You saved the entire program 15 years ago. I've been following your struggles, son. The salute wasn't just from a grateful trainee. It was orchestrated by a high-ranking mentor, the patron, who had been planning this intervention for months. He didn't give his name, only a small, unassuming business card. It was thick, creamy stock, with no title, just a private number and a name, the patron. "I pulled some strings for your flight path today, Phoenix," he said softly. "We needed to know about that microfracture for certain. The safety of the passengers was paramount, and frankly, we knew you were the only one who could reliably diagnose it before the landing. You were the failsafe. And the pilots? They were very happy to oblige their old instructor. You taught Major Reynolds how to weld a hydraulic line under fire. You taught Captain Miller how to stabilize an unspooling wire bundle in a thunderstorm. They haven't forgotten." He had used Jack, yes, but for the highest possible purpose, safety, and in doing so, he had forced the world to finally look at him again. The landing was smooth, the gear holding thanks to the captain's careful compensation and the knowledge of what to expect. As the plane taxied, the shift in the atmosphere was profound. Passengers who had shunned Jack now offered genuine smiles. The businessman in the Teen A actually stood up and, instead of rushing past, shook Jack's hand, his grip firm and sincere. "Sir," the businessman said, his voice thick with admiration.
"Thank you.
And thank you for your service. You have my profound respect." Leo, strutting down the aisle with his dinosaur backpack, no longer needed to be invisible. He was the son of a hero. At the gate, the uniformed major was waiting. She handed Jack a thicker, sealed packet. "Phoenix," she said, her smile warm and genuine. "The patron asked me to deliver this personally. It's from your network." Jack opened the packet in the rush of the terminal. Inside was not one letter, but 4. Each one detailed a life, a career, or a project Jack had saved, signed by Major Reynolds, Captain Miller, and others. The 4th letter was a comprehensive job offer, Director of Logistical Systems and Maintenance Forensics at the nearby air base. The salary was triple what he'd hoped for. The title, Maintenance Forensics, the exact type of obscure, high-level troubleshooting he specialized in, was a direct acknowledgement of his unique brilliance. A final, handwritten note from the patron finished the packet. "They need your kind of vision, Phoenix. Don't be invisible anymore. Go fix the whole damn system." Jack looked down at Leo, who was staring up at the bustling terminal ceiling, the light of the new city reflecting in his eyes. He dropped to one knee, pulling his son close. "Leo," Jack whispered, tears streaming down his face, not of sadness, but of overwhelming gratitude. "We're not going to be small anymore, buddy. We're home." That night, in the quiet of his new apartment's guest room, Jack stood by the window. The city was a glittering tapestry of lights. He had security. He had dignity. He had his identity back. Somewhere out there, in the dark, his old jets were still flying, and his friends, his network, were still watching. For the first time in forever, the silence wasn't empty. It was full of promise. It was full of wings. He closed his eyes and whispered his old call's sign into the night air. "Phoenix." The next morning, the patron called. He said the hydraulic imbalance Jack heard was just the beginning. The job offer was about far more than just fixing pumps. He needed Jack to rebuild the entire supply chain. He needed the Invisible Man to become the architect. The real mission was just beginning.